What is spiritual sovereignty and why might it matter to you?
Welcome to the Inner Truth Seekers podcast, where we help you discover and embody your own inner truth, not just as a concept, but as a way of life.
We're your hosts. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Michael, and in today's episode, we dive into what is spiritual sovereignty, practical and grounded ways that you can recognize where perhaps you're giving your spiritual sovereignty away, why it's important potentially for you to have an awareness of what spiritual sovereignty is and the benefits of honoring that for not only yourself, but for everyone around you. We go into all this and more in today's episode, so let's dive in.
So, spiritual sovereignty. Let's just let that word sink in for a moment. And for anyone listening, just take a moment to sit with those two words, spiritual sovereignty. You know, spiritual sovereignty for you and I, Michael, is foundational to our work at Inner Truth Seekers. And it is in the fabric of everything we do. Another way I might describe it is that our work is anchored in honoring spiritual sovereignty. But you and I notice that oftentimes people have difficulty fully grasping or understanding what that even is, or what spiritual sovereignty actually means. Would you like to help describe that?
Yeah, great. We of course talk about this topic a lot, so I'm glad that we get this opportunity to share this today and to dive deeper into it. Spiritual sovereignty really means, for me, I think firstly we can think about sovereignty. Sovereignty means that you're autonomous in your decision making, that you have autonomy, that you have agency, that you are able to make your own decisions, that you're able to take action based upon what you believe to be true. Sovereignty, when we start thinking about sovereign nations mean that they get to kind of govern the way that they want to. Sovereign nations mean that they're independent from oversight or rule from others. So when we start to apply that to spiritual really in its essence, I mean, it has so many connotations, but I think if we wanted to just simply describe it, it means accessing the non-physical realms or the realm of spirit, our spirit or other spirit. So when we talk about spiritual sovereignty, we're essentially applying what is a well-known concept on Earth, sovereignty. Doesn't mean it's always honoured or respected. That's obviously another topic, or perhaps it's this topic. But sovereignty, which we all kind of understand and know perhaps, and then we apply it to the unseen realms or other aspects of consciousness that are not directly within physical reality. But what the interesting gap is that if you go through the different levels of consciousness in terms of raising consciousness right through to the point where we merge back to one infinite consciousness, spiritual sovereignty is default. Like, sovereignty is already there. And then when we look at the physical realms, while sovereignty is a concept that is understood what it is by most, the bridge between the physical and spiritual is often where sovereignty is lost due to the misunderstanding of the relationship between our infinite self and our human self. And I would also say that human conditioning, trauma, different experiences of control, manipulation that are prevalent within many spiritual traditions, religions, all of these different types of things get overlaid onto quote-unquote spirituality, and therefore, in the process, something that is inherently sovereign becomes unsovereign in its practice. What comes up for you?
Oh, gosh, no, that's true. I think what's coming up for me when you're talking is, and maybe in a new way today that hasn't really landed for me like this before, but you'll hear us talk a lot about the densities of experience. And right now, again, It appears that we're having a mainly third density experience on planet Earth in this incarnation, which is just the density of experience where there's a heavy veil or illusion of separation from God, from each other, from consciousness, however you want to describe that. And what's landing for me when you're talking, Michael, is that in this third density experience of choice, of separation, that it's, I would say, gifted to us, which, from the human part of me is that ain't a gift. That is not a gift. But at the soul level, that's gifted to us to have an opportunity to experience or perceive ourselves to experience infringement. I'm going to say infringement on our sovereignty. Infringement, control, manipulation, enslavement, harm, abuse, violence, all those things that are all acts or energies that do not honor sovereignty. If they do recognize sovereignty, they say, I recognize your sovereignty, but I'm not honoring it. But more than likely, often it's an unconscious or dishonoring of sovereignty. So when we're in this third density incarnational experience on Earth, we have an opportunity to experience or perceive ourselves to experience non-sovereignty. Because, like you said, if you look around in the human experience, people are putting themselves, their thoughts, their biases, their opinions, their judgments, their perceptions, their beliefs onto other people nonstop. I feel this way, so should you. And you say you don't, well, I'm going to make you feel that way or believe that way or behave that way. And if you don't, there's going to be repercussions. There's going to be punishment. I'm going to harm you. I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to take something away from you. So there's a lot of, within non-sovereignty, there's a lot of conditionality. I'll do this if you do this. You can do this, but only if you give me this. I'm going to allow this, but only if, so there's a lot of conditionality in, I'm going to say, non-sovereignty, which I think can also help us better understand what sovereignty actually is or feels like.
Could you give some examples to that? Because I think that really connects with a lot of people. But I think if you could explain that a little bit more in terms of some real life examples, that might help people connect to it even more.
Okay, that's great, and I appreciate you saying that. And honestly, the first thing that comes up, there is, I call him a character that lives around the area where we live, and I do not know him personally. And I know that when I've gone out, taken dogs on the walk, done different things, I see him around town. And sometimes I see him doing things that I would say are not aligned with me, that I don't agree with. The way he behaves or the way he treats people or the way he works. I just acknowledge or recognize, and I won't go into detail because it's boring, but I recognize there's something about this person that is non-resonant with me, that I don't agree with, that it's not the way I would behave or the way I would act or the way I would treat things. And I'm very aware of it. And so because of that, when I see this person out on the street, and I don't know this person, but when I see this person, I always go, inwardly, God, I'm going to see this person again. I'm aware inside, for instance, my humanness might think this person needs to behave and act and be different and do different and work differently and not speak to people like that. And my humanness has all kinds of judgments, thoughts, perceptions, desires, needs, wants, all these things I'm aware of my human mind has in regards to the single person, again, guys, who I don't know, who I just happen to see on the street sometimes. And I'm going to say that the higher version of me, the higher self, the infinite self, the I am awareness, whatever word you want to use to describe it, that part of me recognizes that regardless of what that person says or does, how they behave or don't behave, my role still is to be aware of and strengthen and embody love within myself, for myself, and outward. Okay? So I don't get to go up to this person and tell him what to do or what not to do or how to act or not talk. If he happened to engage me, which I'm sure is never going to happen, if he happened to engage me, then I now have permission to be able to speak my mind, say what feels true from a place of love. But that might be a kind of a silly example, again, of someone that I don't even know, that I recognize, even though I don't agree with the way this person engages their life and what I perceive them to be doing. I don't have any say in it. It's not my role or job to go and infringe on this person and say, do this, don't do this, do it this way. Why aren't you doing it like this? I don't like that you're doing this. I still, somewhere in me, the truer version knows to honor, respect that person's sovereignty in whatever experience they're having. Now, that's kind of a stranger on the street. You know, we might apply that also to a relationship. This is a good one, and you and I know this well. Relationships, oh my gosh, especially romantic love relationships, partnerships. I want my husband to be like this. I think my wife should do this. You know, we have these ideas of what we think a relationship, a marriage, a partnership should be like and what someone needs to be able to give us. Or, you know, if I was talking about you and I, you know, just referencing, a lot of people know what the love languages are. You know, there's different ways of people experiencing or perceiving or sharing love. Love just exists all over the place, but we happen to have tendencies towards desiring or preferring love be expressed or shared in specific ways. So if my love language looks different than yours, Michael, some human part of me that's smaller in its thinking might be like, I need Michael to do this. I need him to show up like this. I need him to share love and express love in this way. And yet, even if I feel or think those things, ultimately, if I'm honoring spiritual sovereignty, some part of me is invited to recognize that you already are love, that you already share love, and that it's possible it may not be in a way that I fully recognize, acknowledge, or connect with. And that I recognize, if you did it in this other way, I would recognize it and acknowledge it and connect with it more. Then I would know I'm loved by you. That's my smaller version human talking. My larger infinite self says, I know that you are love. I know that you share love in a myriad of ways that many of them I can't even see or fathom. And then I can just accept you as that. And then that's me honoring your sovereignty. That's what comes up for me. Would you provide any examples?
Yeah, thanks for sharing those. I think to summarize that to the listeners out there, I would just say that sovereignty is it's a two-way thing. It's like the sovereignty of other people and the sovereignty of the self.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think there's just this recognition that it doesn't really work that you want to be sovereign yourself, but then not honor other people's sovereignty. If you're like going down the spiritual sovereignty route of recognizing that spiritual sovereignty is important, it can't just be something that you can say, great, I need sovereignty, but like I don't care about anyone else's sovereignty. Would you say that that's like an accurate overview?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it invites both.
Great. And then I think like, you know, examples in terms of sovereignty, what I think when we talk about the topic of spiritual sovereignty, I think what happens here is that due to the teacher-student relationship that can often become distorted, and that there are power dynamics that arise from these potentially distorted relationships that don't honor sovereignty or are perhaps unconscious in some aspects. And I think that's also why we always say out to everyone, you know, just take what resonates from what we say. We have no need for you to believe, follow, do what we say. We just share our own experiences, and we share it because it's our own truth. and it feels authentic and it's part of our soul blueprint to do so. But never at any point do we need people to go along with what we say or take on things that are our truths, so that we don't need it to be anyone else's truths, And in many cases, we may inspire another level of truth to grow within your own self, or to be recognized within your own self, I should say. So in terms of dynamics, the power dynamics that can occur in the student-teacher relationship, what occurs is, and this occurs especially in earlier stages of awakening, especially if someone has been what you might call unawakened, or just living life completely in the individuation, not aware of infinite consciousness or the spiritual realm or something like this. What occurs is this awakening to this infinite magic, love, light, truth, consciousness arises, and in many cases, it occurs in the presence of a teacher. And then that love, light, truth, infinite consciousness, God, oneness, immaculate brilliance, whatever we want to call it, gets projected onto the teacher, rather than it being the direct awareness, the recognition that it's actually the direct awareness that you are filled with this bliss, love, light, because it's you recognizing your own consciousness. It's you recognizing the infinite nature of your beingness, and that the limitation that you thought you once had is no longer there. But it gets projected onto the teacher because the teacher may have been the gateway or the key that helped you to unlock that within yourself. But what happens in that point in time, if one's not careful, I would say, or aware, is that the teacher is seen as greater than the self, or the person. And then at that point in time, if you, and the teacher may be a great person, that's not the
right.
point of it, but if at that point you then take everything as truth, if you take everything as that is the ultimate truth, and I'm not going to find out what comes up for my own self, then you're at risk at giving your sovereignty away, because the teacher will tell you to do something that's good for you, and if you don't question that or are aware of that, you may then start going down a path which isn't aligned with your own soul blueprint. You may have inadvertently given your sovereignty away. You may have inadvertently given the very thing that was awakening within inside yourself, which you already had direct access and awareness to. You may have compartmentalized that and put it behind a paywall, if you will, behind a teacher that can only grant you access to that if you do these certain things. Now, depending on the level of the consciousness of the teacher, and, everyone has unconsciousness. Everyone has unconscious.
It's true.
There are aspects of unconsciousness that is the very nature of kind of our reality experience. Even I would say the most enlightened people have aspects of unconsciousness,
Yep.
maybe less than other people. But I think it's dangerous to think that we don't have that. So when the unconsciousness perhaps is present in maybe a very subtle way in one type of teacher, that could be a very gentle kind of, that meditation that I didn't actually bring me any greater awareness of who I am. Okay, so you've kind of lost 20 or 30 minutes of your time, and you've really learnt something new. So the kind of stakes of that aren't really that high. But then when you start going into some of, I would say, some more kind of archaic or older type traditions that are on the planet, that traditions that have originated from those kind of darker times on the planet, and then also those kind of traditions weren't really that high level consciousness, then the kind of consequence of giving your sovereignty over to something that doesn't inherently have your best interest at heart, the consequence of that, can be greater. So, in essence, the practical, we try to give as many practical, grounded ways to kind of ground this into everyday life. The reason why spiritual sovereignty is important is for me, it's a great filter. That something doesn't inherently honor your spiritual sovereignty, then I would question how much to engage that. And for me, I wouldn't engage with something that doesn't recognize my sovereignty. Because in my awareness and experience, when we start to look at, great teachings, channel books, channel teachings, own direct awarenesses that we've had, our own communication with spirit guides, all the way through, the consistent thing is that spiritual sovereignty is inherent. Any guide, teacher, teaching that is in alignment with us, that we've received or experienced, either directly or through reading a book or whatever it might be, the common theme is that no guide or teacher needs anything from you. So at the point that teacher or teaching needs something for you, that for me is a red flag that spiritual sovereignty isn't present within that teaching.
Yeah, all of that's very well said, and it feels like it could spin off about 10 different conversations. It's so good. Spiritual sovereignty, really, there's so many wonderful aspects to dive into with it. What comes up for me when you're saying that, and as an intuitive medium, and, I provide intuitive readings for clients seeking spiritual guidance, and I'm also an intuitive mentor for professionals working to up-level their intuitive expertise in my intuitive development course. And so this comes through a lot with that, and I think we can apply it to human teachers, and I would say spiritual teachers. So oftentimes people have or are aware of or familiar with spirit guides or spiritual teachers that are with them or that they call upon. That could be Jesus, it could be Buddha, it could be Dave, the spirit guide. You and I always talk about just regular old Jill spirit guides who are really sharp. But it could also be a human teacher. And one of the things that I always teach my students that always comes through from spirit, and, again, being oriented in honoring spiritual sovereignty, is be unimpressed with teachers. Be unimpressed with spirit. This idea that, oh my God, I'm connecting with them. This is my favorite, and Archangel Michael probably gets sick of me using him as an example. But, I'm connecting with Archangel Michael. Oh, it's so special. And then people immediately have a tendency, especially in the beginning, to hand their sovereignty over to something they perceive as better or greater than them. And they're, Archangel Michael, here's my sovereignty. I'll do whatever you tell me. Poor little old special me. I can't believe I'm blessed with your presence. When really, those beings that also honor spiritual sovereignty, and Archangel Michael's one of them, they don't need you to be less than them in order to be of service assistance. They show up graciously with an infinite wellspring of guidance, love, and wisdom for anybody. And so I often have to, it comes through often of be unimpressed with spirit. Spirit actually at the highest vibration and frequency of love honors sovereignty. It's unconditional. Non-sovereignty is conditional. And so spirit needs nothing from us. And the same thing is true with what you were talking about with teachers that we encounter, that we cross paths with for a period of time, or maybe our whole lives, just recognizing that we're all human, we're all fallible, and that to be unimpressed with that teacher, just recognize there are things I'm going to be learning from this person. There's things that are going to resonate with me, but more what happens when something resonates with us, with a teacher, like you were saying, what it's really doing, it's sparking a truth that we become aware of that's already within us. It's not something that's outside ourselves. And so if we have a tendency, and humans do, this is the other thing, it's like, if you've done this, I'm raising my hand, if you've done this where you've fallen under the idea that something outside you is providing this source of inspiration, guidance, wisdom, and that you need it or have to rely on it, or you need to find it. That was my experience. When am I going to get the teacher? Michael knows this, you guys. My incarnational experience, my soul blueprint pattern has been that no matter how hard I have sought for a human teacher, doors have been shut in my face, opportunities have closed. It's never happened purposefully. That's been so that I can find my own teaching within and then also be a demonstration of that to the clients and students I work with. I'm grateful for it, but there was a time in my life where I was floundering thinking, poor me, why is no one wanting to teach me? Well, it's because it's not what my soul was desiring in this incarnation. So I've not had the luxury or the opportunity to have teachers that I have to practice through. Am I giving my sovereignty away? Am I holding it? Am I giving it? Is it being honored? I haven't had that opportunity with human teachers like I think many people have. But what's important is that we recognize, and again, Michael said this earlier, you said this earlier, that it's twofold. If I'm honoring my own spiritual sovereignty, well then, it means that I honor the sovereignty of others. And if I'm valuing or prioritizing or practicing honoring the sovereignty of others, well, I'm invited to extend that same honoring to myself, and I'm invited to be aware of, and here's a prompt for anyone listening, are there any areas right now in my life where I'm handing my sovereignty over? Another way of saying that, are there any areas in my life right now where I'm giving my power over to something? And then know that when we do that, if I am in a dynamic with a teacher, in a relationship, with a friend, with a family member, my gosh, family members, you guys, where I'm handing my power over to someone else, that could mean I'm saying, oh, you just tell me what to do and I'll go along with that. I trust that it's best. Well, then what part of me, another thing we can ask ourselves is, what do I perceive myself to be gaining from doing that? That one's going to hurt your feelings, okay? Because in this exact situation, if I'm talking about a family member, the example that comes up is, I'm thinking if I do what they say, maybe I'll be accepted. If I do what they want to do, maybe they'll finally recognize that I love them. Okay? So that's where we start doing things that I say self-sabotage ourselves, where we stop taking responsibility for ourselves in that situation. What's coming up for you?
Yeah, well, I think as an extension from that, what spiritual sovereignty usually comes up against is, and I'll speak from direct experience and kind of what I've seen, other people go through awakenings as well with different teachers or teachings. There's often this point that when you get to a certain level of awakening, like the natural path is, I think for everyone, at some point that you don't necessarily need a teacher or a teaching, because you recognize that everything that you need is within. You learn to access that. Now, of course, that's one of the biggest reasons why we've decided to make Inner Truth Seekers, because we found that the most value that we can have, and has been in our own lives, is teaching people to connect to that consciousness source themselves.
Yes.
So that they can access it themselves and not need any teacher or teaching. With the caveat also that the way that we teach you to do this is a guideline. It's not like the given that that's going to be the best way for you. It's just we kind of have collated all the best ways that have been in our lives and how we've helped other people to connect. And this is what seems to work. Take it or leave it, what works best for you. But what often happens, and I think this is our response to our direct experience, what often happens is that when the student gets to the point of feeling like that they don't need the teacher or the teaching, there's this backlash that often occurs, which goes, no, you still need me.
Where's the backlash coming from?
The backlash is coming from the teacher or the teaching or the tradition or the religion or the cult or whatever it might be.
Got it.
That goes and says, no, you do need me. You do need me. If you don't do these things, then bad things are going to happen or you're not going to be free anymore. But if we come back to the recognition that you're already free, you don't need anything from anyone. All these things are just different paths within the illusion of reality that we're experiencing to learn the lessons of what our soul blueprint is expressing itself, or what we want to learn in this incarnation. So the essence of why spiritual sovereignty is important is that you don't need your teacher or teaching to be completely enlightened. As we've already said, it's improbable that humans have a complete enlightenment all of the time, because they're a human having a human experience. Part of the human experience is to be human. You know, even if we're talking small levels of percentage of unconsciousness. But what we're saying here is the recognition that if you have the embodiment of spiritual sovereignty as a value in the way that you navigate life, physical reality, your own spiritual awakening, you recognize that at any point you're not asking for anyone else to respect your spiritual sovereignty. It's not that you need them to do that. It's the trust and the recognition that you will honor your own spiritual sovereignty. And I think that's the nuance, because at the point where you recognize that it's not being honored, you then have a choice to change your situation into something that is then sovereign. So that's what the relationship between teachers and teachings are. It's not about like needing anyone to do something for you, because all of a sudden, if you're needing something from someone, automatically you're already unsovereign, because you're dependent upon someone else to do something for you to feel whole and complete. Spiritual sovereignty is essentially the recognition that you'll be able to follow your own soul's calling and make appropriate choices, trust yourself through that process. And if you're listening to this and spiritual sovereignty feels like it's something of value to you, because perhaps spiritual sovereignty is not something of value to you, that is also a valid choice. It's also a valid choice. If you want to come, you don't want to be sovereign in this lifetime, that's absolutely fine. But we're kind of speaking to the aspects of us that I believe that recognize that kind of like that choice that we're making, whether it be for or against, or with it or without it. Sovereignty really is about choice, honoring choice, and trusting yourself throughout the process. And I think part of the big process of when we start to have this awakening into spiritual sovereignty, as Jamie, you've already so eloquently said, that powerful and uncomfortable and challenging practice and question and inquiry, which we're saying for a second time, is where am I giving my sovereignty away?
And I'm feeling into that while you're saying that right now, because I'm recognizing that we keep asking that, and so I'm going to be attentive to it. Something that comes up for me right now, and this may resonate with some of you listening, when I am overly experiencing myself as being a victim of circumstance, I am giving my power away, or I'm giving my sovereignty to something outside of myself. And it's not, even as I say that, it's not for me to not recognize that there are things that actually happen in the outer environment that have an affect on me being able to do something or not being able to do something, or something causes me pain, physical or emotional, that's the experience I'm having. But I can feel when you ask that question right now, and I'm going to ask it again, Where in my life right now am I giving away my sovereignty? For me, I can recognize the part of me that has a tendency towards, and quite honestly, and just, for all of you out there that have anything similar, that part of me that likes the story of being a victim of circumstance. Like, I can feel how much I like that part of me. That part of me just really loves that drama, really loves the intensity of the experience there, really loves to, oh my gosh, this thing has happened to me. So I'm also recognizing it's not that I need or want that part of me to go away. It's just recognizing that it exists, and it tends to be the one that hands the sovereignty over. Another thing that comes up, Michael, when you're talking is what I would call the gatekeepers or the intermediaries that place themselves between us and God, or you might say, again, words, depending on who you are, that place themselves between us and love, us and spirit, us and source, us and consciousness. But, there are, I'm going to say, humans or people on the planet, teachers on the planet, that have a tendency, consciously and unconsciously, to place themselves in a position as a gatekeeper between you and your own inner connectedness, between you and God, or they place themselves as an intermediary that, well, you can only have this experience if you do this thing with me. There's no other way for you to experience this thing. And what happens is there can be a tendency sometimes, especially like Michael, like you said, when someone's just sort of coming into their own awareness, into their own awakening, into their own experience of their own consciousness, there can be this idea, although false, that someone holds all the wisdom and I just have to go find it and learn from that person, and then I'll have the keys. When there is wisdom, and there's lots of ways to experience it, to have awareness of it firsthand, and also for it to be reflected through other humans. But there can be a tendency, again, when we're fresh, when we're young, when we're youthful, and I'm talking energetically, okay, not just age-wise, that we have a tendency to want to get really excited about this thing we learned from this person, and then we go and we absorb everything, and then we expect more from them. And then there can be a tendency for those people to enjoy what I would call that sense of false power, okay, because it's not true power. That a teacher might enjoy that false power and want to continue perpetuating that, and want to continue to perpetuate people needing them, people relying upon them. And then that's where that backlash comes of like, oh, you decided you don't need me anymore. Well, hold on a second. Let me rearrange things so that you feel like you do need me again. So it's fine that dynamic exists. What's helpful for anyone to know, anyone listening out there, you don't have to participate in it. Just like simple right now kind of humor, letting you know that you don't have to participate in it. I mean, if it's your soul blueprint to play out this karma ongoing for the rest of this lifetime, fine. But you can very easily right now recognize, this teacher has conditions for me, and they say or show me that in order for me to get this, I must do this. Guess what? It happens to be with them, not anyone else. And I can decide that I no longer will give my power away in this situation or in this context or with this person. Now, you can instantaneously decide that right now. All of us can. I can. Michael can. We all can. And also, we can recognize any part of us that's scared to do that. The part right now, if anyone's feeling the part that's like, well, hold on though, I've put all my eggs in one basket. I thought if I went and did this course with this person that I would finally gain that thing that I've been waiting to gain. If I withdraw my energy from it, I'll never gain it. I just want to speak to those parts that are afraid and say that's not true. It's just simply not true. That's all it is. There's an infinite number of ways that we can access those things that we feel a sincere desire impulse within us.
Yeah, great. And I think to also clarify that it may sound or seem like we're speaking to physical human teachers here, and that is definitely a part of what we've been speaking to. And that might be easy to recognize or understand, implementing kind of what resonates from what we've spoken to today. But what it really becomes also very important is that in your own direct awakening, a natural part of the process of awakening to your true infinite self is the awareness of the spirit realm, and awareness that there are multidimensional beings that are here to assist us and to help us, and also potentially to hinder us in that process. So approaching any intuitive development practice or channeling practice and having spiritual sovereignty as a founding principle or a foundational principle also enables you to see, and of course we'll go into, and there's so many different topics of being able to align and to channel into alignment, but having the recognition that if you're following your own sovereignty throughout that process, you can see yellow flags or red flags that arise quite quickly by the simple recognition of when something needs something from you to do something, to give you something, then it's not unconditional. In other words, it doesn't necessarily honor your sovereignty. Now, we can see this easily in a relationship in the physical realm. If someone says, do these things and then I'll love you, we can see that that is conditional love. And unfortunately, many of us may have experienced the conditions of love in the human realm. And then we can kind of tune into the unconditional love, again, of something like Jesus, or very kind of unconditional loving beings or awarenesses, or just tuning into that unconditional love of the very fabric of beingness. We can see that there's no conditions on that. So when we start to tune into the recognition of guides or teachers or teachings, it can be a useful practice to become aware of whether your sovereignty is honored or not throughout that process, as that can potentially shave off, I would say, years or decades
yes,
of following guidance or guidance from energies or beings that are not necessarily resonant. Just because someone doesn't have a body doesn't mean that they're enlightened. That's also a little mantra just to be aware of. So
say it again.
Just because something doesn't have a body doesn't mean it's enlightened or it has your best interest at heart. So just be aware of that. And there are many different teachings and entities, beings, energies that one might come in contact with that are non-physical representations of lower density energies, which will require you to do something. Now, when you start doing something to get something, you've immediately already given away a part of your sovereignty. So just recognizing when you give something away for a condition, especially if it's something that you don't really want to do, but you're doing it for the outcome of something, just notice and tune in for yourself. Do I still have sovereignty? And the reason being, and how that relates to sovereignty is, if something is offered to you from a non-physical being or consciousness that requires you to do something non-resonant to get there, or just requires anything from you at all, what the underlying concept that you're potentially buying into is that it's not already available to you, which then creates the experience of the intermediary between you and what is already here, because you are already free and everything's always present. Just be aware that when we give our sovereignty away, we start giving our power away to these energies and beings. Now, there's a difference between energy or a being saying, hey, if you try this meditation, try this meditation and see what your direct experience is. That's different to you have to do all these things that will cause suffering to you for a period of 5 days until you're completely depleted of everything to be able to have a connection with me. There's very different things. And we laugh, but these are the types of things that we see and experience. So spiritual sovereignty, I think, for me, to kind of like summarize that, is, if I was going to like give a few things to take away from today's conversation, is recognize that you're already sovereign.
Yes.
Like that is like your ground-based state, that your sovereignty is already there. Okay. Secondly, and I won't say the question again because we've said it too many times, but if you have given sovereignty away in any way, shape or form, getting it back is actually way easier than you would think. Maybe we should have said that before everyone was freaking out a little bit earlier. Like getting it back it can be in many situations can just be recognizing that you've given it away and saying, I take my sovereignty back. Like it can be just as simple as that. In some cases, there may be, different things that might need to play out, or conversations or other things or physical kind of actions to kind of embody that. But for the most part, as soon as you become aware of it, you can begin to kind of take that back, because you never actually gave it away. You just thought you did, and because you believed you did, you have the experience of being unsovereign.
I love that.
So we have the foundation that the sovereignty is always there. So to get it back, you just have to recognize that you never really gave it away. So I think that's probably summarizes it for me.
Oh, I love that. That's brilliant. One last thing I'll add that's coming up while you're talking is something any of us can ask ourselves also to practice embodying our own sovereignty, is just asking ourselves when we're in situations, conversations, reading the news, anything that's happening, we can always just kind of close our eyes and ask, is this true for me? Does this feel true for me? And we get to have our own sense of what feels true for us. This person, something benign, like someone says, oh, you should always drink lemonade right before lunch. I'm a nutritionist. I'm an expert. And yeah, a lot of people have a lot of good, professional credentials. And we still get to say, is that true for me that I should drink lemonade before lunch? Michael knows the answer. No, I should drink lemonade all day long. So there you have it.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this in another episode, but the recognition that when something is true for someone else, it doesn't mean that it's true for you, because they may have and obviously have a different soul blueprint to you. So taking other people's awareness, guidance, advice as the truth for you, it might just not be true for you. And that doesn't mean that it's not true for the other person, which is why when we honor sovereignty for ourselves, we also honor in the sovereign choice for someone to practice, behave, engage in that way, because who are we to say that that's not correct? Who are we to say that acting or behaving in that way isn't actually exactly right for that person? So to come back to that sovereignty, it's just a recognizing that sovereignty exists and that we can honor that within ourselves and others. And I think that when we do that, it can actually be quite freeing. And those kind of judgments and other things that we, humanly have, as we've kind of touched on, that can also just be like the antidote to those, is recognizing everyone's sovereign choice. So yeah, I think that probably wraps it up from me. Do you have anything else that you want to add?
I think we covered it.
Yeah, great. Thank you everyone for tuning in. It's been great to be with you. Check out our website at innertruthseekers.com, where you can find all of our free resources, more videos, exercises, and our one-on-one courses and programs to help you to connect, embody, and discover your own inner truth. So thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks. Bye.